And even if Congress were to stop all of the spending programs in the normal budget, dismantle the armed forces, close down all of its agencies and bureaus, stop all of its subsidies, and board up all of its buildings, including the White House, it would be able to reduce its present spending only by 1/3. That is simply astonishing that all the debate we see in Washington right now is really over pennies compared to the real problem that we have in this nation.
Yeah, that's true. And unfortunately, the people who are benefiting from all of that are not going to talk about the real problem. They'll talk about little things that require Band-Aids, but not that require surgery. So that's the problem. As I said before, that it's out of control. It's really past the point of repair. The damage is done. There's no way to avoid it. That doesn't mean we can't recover, but what it does mean is that we can't recover without paying one terrible price. It's like I think a good analogy would be it's like an alcoholic who has gone full course. He's got the DTs now. He sees white elephants floating around on the ceiling. He got the shivers and shakes. He can't stand. His vision is blurred. All of these things, and he's almost on the verge of death. And somebody comes along and says, "Well, how are you going to fix this guy?" And the doctor says, "Well, let's give him a shot of whiskey." This is what they're doing now. They're giving this sickly patient, our economy, the same medicine. They call it medicine, but it was the same drug that put the patient on the verge of death in the first place, which is this expansion of the money supply and incredibly expanding debt. So you just look at it, and here's this patient. This patient might die, but at best, if he recovers, he's got to go through one heck of a recovery period. He's got to detox. Mm-hmm. And that's not going to be pleasant. So I'm simply saying my message is those Pollyannas who want to say, well, what can we do without paying a price? There is nothing we can do now without paying the price. There has to be a price paid now. And it's just a question of the sooner we get started with it, the less severe it will be. And if we don't get started pretty soon, we may not be able to save the patient at all.
Yeah, it's a tough message, Ed. It's been one of the most difficult things that we've been saying and trying to help Americans understand for the last several years is that America is insolvent. America is a bankrupt nation, and our national bankruptcy is a direct result of the violation of the basic monetary principles that are found both in the Bible when it talks about unjust weights and balances, false weights and balances, and also, ironically, even in the document that this nation claims as its guide, the United States Constitution. So we've dishonored crystal clear warnings from the past, and in so doing, we are corrupting our future, as you pointed out. And in your book, you point this out as well, The Creature from Jekyll Island. You make these points painstakingly clear. It makes me wonder, Ed, because you know people like this, and I do too, who sit on the edge of their seat watching the political debates, and they believe in their minds firmly that if we could just get this particular person into office, or if we could just get this particular party, dominating the city of Washington, that somehow all of this could be changed. But the way that you paint this picture, and the way I think both of us believe, is that this thing is lock, stock, and barrel. The globalists control this thing. Am I right?
Absolutely correct. Yeah, this has very little, if anything, to do with individual personalities. The political leaders that grace the front page of our newspapers are pretty much dispensable characters. They're like actors on the stage. I mean, if you have a major play in Broadway, and especially if it's a musical, you have understudies. So in case the lead actor is sick or gets killed, you can go on the next day with his replacement. Mm-hmm. And he's almost indistinguishable from the original. Mm-hmm. And so that's what happens in politics. We have these people who are put up as candidates for political office, but they're dispensable. if something happens to them, if they get sick or they get old or they fall into disfavor, or they get caught in a scandal, or whatever happens, their political party goes into disfavor and they're replaced by somebody else, doesn't make any difference. They're just figureheads. They're actors on the stage, and they read their lines and follow the plot of the play. And I know that probably sounds pretty extreme to some people, but it's certainly my conviction after studying this for a long time. I don't think that any of the so-called major political players in the world are really their own people. I think that they're put up by very powerful forces behind the scenes, and they pretty much follow the script that's given to them.
And so when Americans get angry, at particular politicians or whatever, it's really part and parcel of the design. It's actually a good thing for the globalists because it keeps the attention off of them, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely, yes. And in fact, this has been worked out and theorized very carefully. There was a professor of history by the name of Carroll Quigley, who's deceased now, but he's written several interesting books. He was a professor at Georgetown University.
Right.
And he was William Clinton's teacher when Clinton was a student there, and became very close to Clinton. And well, that's another story. But anyway, the point I'm driving at, I know we have limited time, is that Professor Quigley wrote a couple of books, and one of them was called Tragedy and Hope. And in that book, Quigley is talking about, he's a historian, remember, and he's writing the history of the world's largest secret society. And it's the one that Quigley says really runs the Western world today. And the society doesn't really have a name because they chose not to have a name, because that would add to their ability to remain secret. They decided that if they chose a name and used a name, well, then people could talk about it. And so one of their conscious decisions was not to have a name. And even Quigley refers to it at various points in his book as the group or the association and so forth. But the secret society was created by Cecil Rhodes and the tremendous wealth that he had. And the reason I'm mentioning all of this is because Quigley, in his book, says he admires this group. He's not really a member of it, but he's their historian. And he says, quote, I was allowed for several years to study their private files and papers. And he was allowed into the inner circle. And then he says, I have no aversion to it at all. He says, my only objection to this group is that they choose to remain secret. And he felt that they deserved to get some credit for what they were doing, running the world. Well, having said all that, now he finally comes to a place in his book where he says, how is it possible for us, and he's referring now to this group and more or less himself on the sidelines, how is it possible for the elites of the world to run the world and at the same time allow the citizens the illusion that they are determining their own political destiny? People live in democracies now. They have a vote. They select their leaders. They determine their own political destiny, or so they insist on thinking. They demand that right. So the question is, how do you let people have the vote and yet make sure that you make the decisions and not them? And he answers the question. He says, well, it's very simple. All you have to do is have two major political parties, let them fight it out between the two, but we control them both. There you have it.
Wow.
That's what's been going on in the United States since at least the turn of the last century. It all started in full force under the Wilson administration. And yet, the American people, and myself included, until I really got deep into this, we knew nothing at all about this. And that's how secret societies work.
Well, I'm sure that's a mind bender for some of our listeners. We've painted a pretty dark, dismal picture of where the society at large seems to be heading. Based on all your research, based on everything that you've studied, what hope or what kind of suggestions can you offer people to help them, number one, wake up from what's happening right now, and number two, what practical things can they do, what can they put into practice in their own lives that may help them thrive in this environment?
Excellent questions, and that really cuts to the core. There are only two things that we need to focus on. One is to make sure that our information is correct. In other words, to become informed. Well, we hear that all the time. Read another book, go to a lecture, all this sort of thing. It's necessary. For most of us, when we started down this path, we needed a lot of that. Mm-hmm. And so if any of your listeners are new to this, I would say don't skip over this step, because there are so many elements of deception out there, so many myths that need to be exposed, that if you start to take action without really understanding what's going on, you're going to be easily defeated. In fact, you may even wind up working against yourself. You'll be tricked into working against your own best interests. So, yes, if anybody wants to learn as much as possible on a quick schedule, I would urge them to come to our website. We created a place just for that. It's our commercial site where we have books and recordings, and that's called The Reality Zone. So we have about 100 different items there, and you can spend a lot of time reading and looking at videos and listening to recordings, all of which we think are very essential for a real understanding of what's going on in the world. So the first thing is, yes, become informed. Go to realityzone.com and take a look at what we have there. But then what? Okay, if we don't do anything with that knowledge, it doesn't make any difference. And the only thing we can do, really, is to recapture control of the system. You can write letters all you want to your congressman and to the bankers, and they laugh at you. Mm-hmm. They don't, the idea of the politicians who have been put into office because of the huge amounts of money that have been put at their disposal through the lobbying efforts of huge corporations and banks, and the influence that comes from control over the media and network endorsements and all of that sort of thing, that is so powerful compared to the little guy who votes. Especially when he aligns himself with the two major political parties and pretty much follows whatever his party leaders tell him to do. The voters really are out of this picture today. So the only thing we can do, instead of trying to write letters to your congressman and say, oh, please, won't you do what is right? Won't you please follow the Constitution? And they laugh at you. The only thing is to get in there and run for office and to start taking back the levers of power ourselves. You can't convert these guys. Most of them. There are some great exceptions, I might say. But on the average, the ones that are in office today are so thoroughly corrupted by the system that you are not going to change them. All you can do is replace them. And so this is a very important issue, I think, is how do we, who do not have an axe to grind, who really do want to follow the Constitution, how do we replace the people who are already in office? And that is a plan which is laid out by an organization that we created called Freedom Force International. And so anybody that really wants to get involved in doing something about it and becoming a real change agent, I urge them to come to that website. It's called freedomforceinternational.org. freedomforceinternational.org. And learn what it is we believe in, what is our code of conduct, what is our creed that we believe in, and then our strategy. How do we help each other become successful in recapturing control of the political systems of the nations in which we live? It's a big task, and it's not going to happen easily, and it's not going to happen quickly. It's not going to happen by November. Most people's time frame, their time frame is, well, who are you going to vote for in November? Like, that's the whole story. That's just one little piece of it. So anyway, if you really are interested in how we can turn this around, it might take a generation. It might even take 2 generations. But it can be done. And once you get the idea that it can be done, in fact, it will be done. There's no question now in my mind. It's already started. You can't stop it. It will be done. And once you get that picture, it's very, very encouraging. So for those that want to become part of the solution, I invite them to come to the website called freedomforceinternational.org and learn all about it.
All right. Well, on that note, Ed, I want to thank you so much for your time today on Follow the Money Weekly Radio. Your book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, A Second Look at the Federal Reserve. Where's the best place for them to pick